Hello everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of Just the Basics Factorio in 0.16.x. This is going to be a bit of an odd one, as I'm presuming you've already guessed from the visuals, but hey, a lot of people like to watch my videos as a podcast anyways. So, last week, I discovered I didn't actually have any footage to make an episode out of, which was rather inconvenient because I discovered it on the day an episode was supposed to go out. So I made a 2 hours-ish long bonus stream, which happens on occasion, and in that stream I was just mostly tidying things up and pursuing some oil, because we are in dire need of oil. Now, the opening hour or so of this stream that you're seeing at about 5 times speed, more or less went fairly smoothly. We patrolled the area and explored and such that was being affected by our pollution, whilst mostly we just amped up our various researches that were going on. And here I am, of course, bemoaning the fact that we need oil and such to get laser turrets that make turret creep really ridiculously easy, but oh well. And we're just looking around for different bases of the aliens that might actually be a problem for us, either immediately or in the near future, in order to curb the relentless assault that's been happening on our base. And that's, that's fairly par for the course. That's the kind of thing you do just generally. It's not really a huge problem. The bases tend to be relatively small, there don't tend to be many worms, they tend to be fairly far apart, and this more or less proceeded exactly as anticipated, excepting the fact that, of course, it got very dark, so I couldn't really see anything, so I was glad I brought a few turrets with me at that particular moment in time. Things got significantly worse after this, and you'll find out why very, very swiftly, but suffice to say, we roamed around. We didn't really find very many bases that had skipped our notice inside of the pollution cloud. There was a fair few more worms here than I'd initially anticipated, so I left the turrets up to just sort of serve as distraction for the actual spitters and biters and such that might come around. During this time, we didn't really have anything to worry about at the base. Everything was ticking along quite nicely. We are in dire need of a much more abundant source of iron ore, so that's a thing that we're going to be looking for in the future. But for the most part, we had a fairly uneventful scouring of our pollution. I think I only lost one car in the course of this particular expedition, but this is just a fairly standard kind of patrol, as it were. You go around, you're looking for basically anywhere there's a nest. You set up a couple of turrets just to make sure you've got somewhere nice to retreat to if you're using the car, which is quite squishy, and you just continually hit and run, more or less, and try very hard not to run into anything, because the car doesn't really have much in the way of actual stopping power, so it will quite happily be stopped by a tree, which can lead to your doom, to say nothing of actual rocks, which will potentially destroy your car, and almost certainly result in your doom. So yeah, the car is not great, but it's still a hell of a lot better than running around on your bare feet at this stage of our game. And as we can see there, we discovered that there is in fact something attacking our mining from the west. We haven't as yet discovered what it is. At least not at this stage in the stream, and there's me practically running into a rock and spelling out my own doom, so you had to be very careful when you're driving, just to make sure you don't end up in a bad situation at the really, really worst time. So we're just sort of patrolling the outer edges of our pollution here, looking for any signs of bases that might be a problem imminently or immediately. And for the most part, yep, there goes the first car of this particular stream, because I ran into a rock and couldn't retreat from all of the biters that were eating me. Practical lessons here, everybody, practical lessons. So now I'm just cleaning that up with a turret, and off we go once again. Just making sure we can find everything. Yep, there's another one. This one I'm just having to take on by hand, because I can't really put a turret close enough. But there we go. And now it's pitch black, and I'm not about to go hunting on foot for more bases in the dark, so we'll retreat to our base quite normally. Now, of course, you're seeing all of the stream alerts and such on this particular footage. You're not hearing any of the audio of me chattering away, you're not hearing the actual in-game noises, but I have done what I could to at least reconstruct something resembling a video game soundtrack for you guys, so you got something to listen to in addition to me. And grab a few materials. Thankfully we do have belts and bullets and whatnot being constructed en masse now, so it's not too difficult to make a brand new car. It's just a fair bit of faff, and of course you tend to have your car destroyed whilst you're several miles out of territory, so it's a bit of a pain nonetheless. And there is an interesting sort of maze of hills and such just to the northwest of our base. It's kind of a worrying kind of labyrinth to go through. But here we have the group that has most assuredly been attacking our mining operations, because it is fairly large, and it is most definitely inside of our pollution. So this one proves to be a little bit of a problem, so we're gonna set up a few turrets on the hill and wait for dawn. Try not to attack in the darkness, because it's really not healthy, suffice to say. The radar view thankfully always has some degree of light, but in the dark you're basically blind for the most part. There is the night vision module that you can put into modular armor and such later on, but we don't have it because it requires advanced circuits, which is to say red circuits, which is to say circuits that require plastic, which is to say circuits that require oil. So, yeah, we're just gonna continually zoom in, do some damage, and then retreat to our hill over there with the 3 turrets that are doing our work quite nicely. So this doesn't last much longer. It does end up with a dramatic amount of corpses just piling up around this hill, but well, they're not our corpses, so that's the significant thing for our gameplay here. Yep, there we have the Hand of Fuzz just paying me a visit just whilst things are going on here. And back home. So now begins our much more arduous task, which is we've cleared out all of the bases that could be attacking us, so we've gotten ourselves a fair bit of breathing room. As long as we don't drastically increase our pollution, then we should have a fair bit of safety going on. But we now have to get back to the main problem at hand, which is that whilst we have engines being created, whilst we can definitely make up mining, electric mining drills quite happily en masse, we don't have any oil, and that is critical to making advanced circuits, which we need to make the blue science, which we need to get access to the tank. You don't actually need red circuits to make a tank, but you do need them to actually research making the tank. So we need red circuits to research the tank, and it's going to become incredibly obvious here just how helpful having the tank right now would be, because as it turns out, not terribly far outside of our pollution cloud, the enemy bases are very dense. It seems as though they've been spreading and breeding this entire time, and consequently, there's so much to deal with outside of our sort of immediate area. Consequently, things are gonna get very deadly very, very quickly, and I'm having to make gratuitous use of grenades here just to clean up the crowds following me as I try and deal with these nests. And meanwhile, we're just gonna continue trying to get our productivity up, because, again, we don't really have the iron remotely to support what we're doing right now. We've depleted a few different drills, and the patch is just not large enough to support. So, that's a thing we had to worry about. Getting a little bit sneaky with some of these turret positions and such. So what we're trying to do is patrol a little bit beyond our pollution area so that we can find potentially some resources, but also most importantly, any more bases that we might annoy in the near future as we continue to expand. And then the main thing is there any oil? So we're just going to try and get through this labyrinth, carve our way with some grenades, which thankfully are now at the stage where they're fully able to get rid of trees in one hit. So it makes getting through a forest very easy. And see what we can find with only a slight bit more murder. Hopefully of the enemy, not us. Somebody in the chat there suggesting that I check out the atomic bomb. So, yeah, we're a ways from the atomic bomb, but I would like to try it out. Eventually. So here we are, trying to expand to the north. There isn't terribly much here. The main problem is, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly why this is, it might just be pure dumb luck. This particular map, and I've made dozens of Factorio maps before, seems to have the smallest amount of oil I have ever seen. There's a grand total, I think, at this point in our little footage here, of 3 oil wells. And a given oil well, unlike a given ore deposit, can only have 1 miner on it. So consequently, the number of oil wells you have is the chief and primary limiting factor to how much oil you can get and how quickly. So we're just trying to drive around and see if we can pick up any more on radar and such, trying mostly just to outrun anything that's following us. We don't care too much about actually killing it until it gets dark and we have to stop driving. And in the span of that, we find that there's 2 different patches. They're not even close enough to register as 1 patch of 2 up there, so that's 4. There's another 1 much closer to our base, but again, it's 1. We find a couple more down to the south here eventually, but it's surrounded by bases, so it will take an utter age to so much as build there, much less secure there. And basically, what we run into here is an unfortunate property of plastic research, of red circuits, of oil in general, which is that there is no intermediate or immediate benefit to actually setting up oil production and development. You put the drills down, the pumps to be precise, you get the oil, you process the oil, you break it down into light, heavy, petroleum gas, as well as occasionally lubricant, which is necessary for some things. Oh, there goes our second car there, oh dear. And basically you have to do every single bit of that before you can get even the slightest bit of actual benefit out of this entire process, because you need petroleum gas alone to make plastic, and that's where you get the red circuits. There is nothing you can really do with any of this. The one thing that you can actually remotely do is make flamethrower turrets, but flamethrower turrets here aren't going to help us because we need to ship the oil to them to make them actually work. And what's more, they actually create pollution whilst they fire, so they're actually just going to exacerbate our issues. Unlike the gun turrets, the laser turrets and such, they don't actually kill things, they just more or less lay down pools of fire that if you're lucky, the enemy is still running into. So they're not terribly commonly seen in most Factorio plays. We could also make our own handheld flamethrower and actually go around burninating the countryside, but same problem. We can't use that whilst we're inside of the cars, so yeah. So consequently, just as we're returning back to base before we head out once again in another cardinal direction, hoping we can find a better source of oil, we're at this very, very frustrating point in the development of a Factorio world, where there's a lot of work we have to put into before we can get any kind of benefit from it, and for whatever reason, this has been compounded by the fact that there is just nothing there. There is incredibly little here to actually even begin working on getting plastic and red circuits and such going. So what we're looking at right now is that this world is kind of dead, because even if we harvest from every single oil well that we have found, it's not going to be enough to actually sustain us even in the short term. Because unlike an ore deposit that will eventually be completely destroyed by mining, oil wells don't actually die, they just get significantly slower. So if you have a field of, say, 15 different oil wells and you're, oh, yep, there goes me, and you're just mining all of those out, then you can still get a useful amount of oil out of them, even if you've been mining them continuously for weeks, actual real-world weeks. But we only have 5 within even just short drive of the actual base. And even those aren't very good, because they're fairly close, and the ones that are deposits and such that are close to your starting zone tend to be smaller, because it encourages you to move outwards as you develop your base and such. So we don't really have the materials to support getting to a actual later stage kind of play, because we just don't have the materials to make the red circuits and then to make the blue circuits much later on. So we're going to have a fair bit of trouble going forwards. Now, I do have a plan, because whilst this is a relatively dire situation, whilst this is definitely a very unexpected problem, there is some oil. So if we take all of that, as much of it as we can, we should at the very least be able to research the tank. Now, I've been heading towards the tank quite viciously for a very good reason. It wasn't this reason, but it was definitely a very good reason. And that reason is that whilst it's significantly slower than our car, it is dramatically more heavily armored. So if we can get to the tank, if we can get the petroleum gas necessary to make the blue signs to make the tank, then we will be much more capable of driving off into the horizon and finding ourselves an actual decent and useful amount of oil, presuming that it exists at all on this world. And here's me giving up mildly and setting up a lot of different radars, just so that we can try and get a bit more information on the map and find out exactly where everything is, so hopefully we can find some oil without actually having to risk our lives so much. But those are not very fast, and the more of them you put in, the more your power gets drained. So what we're gonna do, essentially, is we're gonna keep going with this world. We're gonna struggle past this very unforeseen problem. We have at least given ourselves the breathing room of clearing out all of the nests, but you really can see just how incredibly dense all of the nests are. Not even honestly that far outside of our starting zone. It is kind of amazing. I don't know that I've seen them be quite so dense ever before, and I've definitely never seen oil be this rare before. So we're just gonna run up over here to the closest well that we have. Clear it out with grenades. That's not remotely gonna be a problem. You can barely even see this one. Hook that up to a tank, put it around with some defenses, get it some power, and that will get us about 25k. I don't know the exact fluid value here for this, in Factorio at least, of oil that we can then start to process and get towards our tank. Once we have our tank, we can try and find a better source of oil. As it stands, this one we are probably just going to pump directly into our base, because it's not even honestly that far away to really justify a train. A train would just be a whole other level of trouble. Trains are a thing we'll be getting into in the very near future, just not right now, because like oil, they have a significant uptick of things you have to do before they actually pay off. Although it is significantly better than with oil, and we are going to be needing that for some iron. So, with that, I will catch you all next time.